This week's episode is about the connection between mental health and creativity. Oftentimes, students are so caught up with getting good grades or a prestigious job that they forget to have fun. They forget that learning is supposed to bring joy. They don't realize that writing a research paper is actually a creative process, and it is possible to inject their own personality into that process. Most of all, they can easily buy into the idea that being successful means suppressing one's emotions. But feelings are not our enemy, they are our friend. This week's guest is Phoebe Taylor, artist, mindful mover, community maker, and creative director of OK Shoe. Her work explores the intersection of art, mindfulness, intuition, and movement. OK Shoe works collaboratively with artists to create stuff and space for feeling okay. Her work as a visual artist utilizes zines and other modes of public art and installations. She believes one good rock show can change the world. Art is for everyone to make and enjoy, and everyone deserves to feel good in their body, even you. Welcome to our podcast, Breathe In, Write Out, Phoebe.
Thanks so much for that sweet intro, Lisa.
You're welcome. I've been following you for a while on social media. We have a mutual contact. And I was saying before we started recording, how impressed I am with how you do so many different things, but there's a clear intention or a clear sense of who you are. And I think that takes time to develop. So especially as a creative person, because I still think it's hard to be creative in the world we live in. It's not really a place that encourages that still. It's getting better. But could you tell us a little bit about your journey? How did you get to where you are today? And in what way does education play a role in that?
Yeah. Oh man. Yes, I so agree. I don't really feel like we live in a world that really allows any space for creativity. And when it does, it's like it looks a very specific way, like art goes in a gallery and who's creating that art and who's in control of those things. I think we have a very narrow idea of, and I, like you had read in my intro, I really do believe like all humans are creative beings, and there's just everything in the whole world that tells us not to be creative. And I ask a lot of people, kind of like, talking about how I work as an artist and when I'm working with individuals as well. I ask people, it's like, who told you that you can't be creative? Because I think
Right.
that's like when we talk a lot about, like kind of core beliefs and how those things, it's like, oh, wait a second, like who put this here? Who put this seed in me? Like who watered it? And I think a lot of the time it's like well-meaning, whether it's like parents, teachers, a real life person or not, maybe something you heard on the television. I mean, I could list a cajillion systems that tell us not to be creative. So yeah, I when I think about that, I grew up as a pretty creative child. I feel very lucky. Both my mom and my stepdad are both artists. All of my siblings are artists as well. My partner is an artist. His family comes from a family of artists. So I feel extremely privileged in that. And I think a lot of, my personality and the way I like to work is really fostered because of the amount of space that the close people in my life have given me and allow me to be strange and like, I don't know, paint blobs on the wall behind me if I feel like it one day. So yeah, I like, it sounds very basic and boring. But when I was a kid, like I just always knew I wanted to be an artist, and I for sure had people in my life telling me not to. In school, I was diagnosed with dyslexia and dyscalculia, very, very kind of late. Like I was in the 5th grade by the time I actually got a real diagnosis. And like, for a little girl growing up in like the late 90s, early 2000s, I don't really know what elementary education is like right now. But it's not great. Like there's not a lot of resources for kids that can't read. I was given extra time on tests, which is like when you don't know what the words on the page are, like extra time isn't really going to be the thing that helps you.
Compounding the frustration.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really disliked that part of school, but I was good at it. Like I really did love school. And so with that in mind, I was like, well, I know I like the visual aspects of learning. I really know I love storytelling. Like I couldn't read. I loved English class. Like,
right.
Tell me how that works, kind of thing. So when it came down to school, I was like, well, I kind of think that there's only really one place that would be good for me, and that was art school. I went to OCAD. And I feel, again, like very, very lucky, very privileged to have that education. I think art school is a really interesting concept. Applying academics to something that is so creative. A lot of the times, I think some art schools still actually don't have a grading system. OCAD does. Like a lot of them work on like a pass or fail. But yeah, I think like as far as how I integrate creativity and how I think that applies to academics is just like giving myself and if I don't have that, like creating space for me to feel, think, like express, maybe be a bit like loud. That's usually how that translates, is to loudness.
Interesting. Yeah. When you were talking, I was thinking, and you were talking about who told you not to be creative. I think what you're talking about is people just kind of like shut off their inner child. And you were very lucky to, and same, like my parents are more academic, but they were also silly. So I don't feel like the other day I went to visit a student. She has about like an 8-year-old daughter, and we were just being goofy on the street, like doing some can or whatever. And the other, her mom and my other student who's 25 is looking at me like, no, what are you doing? Like, this is so uncool. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's just that, you're not supposed to do that as an adult.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, oh man, like what we think is creative so often is attributed to children. And like, man, if we had a like first grade teacher following us around every day, reminding us of all of the lessons that we were told in the first grade, like share, take a break if you need to, maybe have a nap. Hey, are you hungry? Like have a snack. Just like very basic things that, yes, we attribute to like, oh, I'm an adult now, so I know those things. I don't know. Do
like,
you?
I don't need to do those things.
Yeah.
I think what happens with, I don't need a nap. I'm an adult. Like nap time is for kids. Snacks? No. I have a very restricted diet because I have to keep my body a certain way because of social norms about like beauty.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Like, and I think when we get down to the same thing, it's like, who put those beliefs there? And like, do you actually want them there? Like, if that's a seed that somebody came into your garden and planted, like you can weed that. Like you can dig that thing up by the roots. I mean, it's not easy. It takes a lot of work. I'm not really, like I say all these things, I'm not an expert at them in any kind of capacity. And I think a lot of my work as an artist, or it is, but a lot of my work as an artist and what I'm trying to do in the world is like, I don't have this like stuff figured out. But I am making an effort, and like I'm happy to like bring you along for the ride and show you my process.
Right. That's so interesting. You know what? Because okay, so I have a big day of podcasts today. And I was talking to an old classmate of mine from my graduate school degree. He's actually a lawyer and he works in communications. But interestingly, when I asked him, what advice would you have for students? He said a very similar thing to you, which was, there's no plan. Just go out and try stuff. So my point is this: someone who's in an industry that's seen as more like serious, and he's dealing with world crises, like an airplane crashes. What should we tell the public? for Boeing or whatever, creativity is still a huge part of how he got to where he is and how he continues to do his job. And interestingly, same thing, I interviewed a really prominent professor at the University of Toronto over the summer. Same advice. Go out, make mistakes, try stuff, be creative, be a whole person. Don't just focus on getting an A or, meeting these expectations put on you by either a teacher or your boss or whoever. But the people who are very successful and happy and whatever, I just said there's no formula, but there seems to be something about this like fluidity, this hanging on to that inner child, fun, being creative, that you'll see they're the kind of people, they're just kind of like, okay. They're kind of like, okay with themselves. And in a way, success looks easy from the outside.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like what I was saying, this narrow idea of what like art and creativity looks like, and that it's for some and not for others. Or you're creative or you're not. I hate that one.
Right.
Like that.
Everybody is, even in any way.
In any way. And like, exactly like you're saying, like a lawyer, like professors, people use plumbers. Like right. You're going to use creativity. You're going to use like critical thinking, problem solving ideas. I'm not a neuroscientist at all, but like we do carve these neural pathways to problem solve. And like you become like when you're faced with an issue, like of any kind, like whether it's like, I don't know which way to go in traffic, or like, I'm struggling with this essay. I need to like maybe take a break and go out and find some inspiration.
Right.
We like, the more we practice this thing, this like, space for our brains to explore, or whatever that practice is, or like in a non-judgmental space, like the better our brains can get, be like, oh, I need to go out and like find some inspiration. I know where I can find that. Like maybe that's picking up my journal. Maybe that's going for a walk. Maybe that means like I say often, like, I don't know your life, but like figuring and finding out what those things for you are, it's like so invaluable. And no matter what you're doing in life, like you're just going to use your big, beautiful, creative mind to figure those things out.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, I get so like.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to, like, I was talking to the previous speaker about the value of a liberal arts degree. And what we came down with was like, well, it's a degree where not knowing the answer is not only okay, but part of the process. Like, it's just a thing, you accept the uncertainty. You can study something forever and someone else can come along and say, you know what, did you think about this? And then your theory is just, but that's okay. That's part of getting better at what you do. And I think that also seems to be connected to create, like you were saying, there's the paintings in the museum where we seem to put some sort of standard on them. But really, creativity is like, there's no answer. As you're saying, it's about what you yourself find or decide, or how you express yourself. It's very kind of personal, individual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I a mantra I have to myself, it's like I say often, is everything is an experiment. And I think if you put that, if like that's your lens going into something, you're like, oh, I can't fail because I'm going to collect some sort of information. Or I like to think of myself as like a little scientist sometimes out in the world. I'm like, oh, I'm like a little field scientist. Like I can't fail because I'll collect that data about myself in some way. And I think, especially I think when we're young, our students are told in like an academic setting, like you're put a lot of pressure to like figure it out at an extremely young age. I took a couple of years off before I went and did my undergrad. And I like, that was not cool with anybody in my life.
Even your parents who were artists?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
And
interesting.
I mean, like, my parents are separated. I lovingly say I have four parents. Only one of them has a degree. Like, no, I was the first in my family to go and like finish a university degree. But yeah, it was not an okay thing. And I was just like, I don't actually, I mean, I know I want something creative, but I don't know, like that sounds like a very intense thing to be very sure about.
Right.
Um, and yeah, I don't know, it's scary and weird. So I think not knowing what we like in the world can be just as valuable as knowing what we
Mhm.
do. Like, oh, I hate, oh my gosh, like I hated waiting tables. I just hated it. I
Oh,
know there's
okay,
some
that's like a
people in the
nice.
world that like that's their passion. I hated waitressing. And every day I went to work, I felt deep dark dread. And I think that's just as valuable as knowing like, oh, I like, you know, being a freak clown in my house and like lying on the floor and yelling.
Well, that's interesting. I went through a similar experience. Like, I think there's, as you said, a lot of pressure. You're supposed to, even when you're like in grade, I don't know if this happened, but like in grade two or something, they're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like every single year, right? And you're supposed to somehow know this. So by the time you get into your mid 20s, you're like, I haven't figured it out, or I'm not doing this thing I drew in my grade two picture.
Yeah.
And I remember being frustrated because I'd figure, oh, I don't like this, oh, I don't like this. When am I going to find the thing that I do like? But actually, that process of figuring out, I don't like this, I don't like this, actually kind of narrowed it down to what I do like. So I didn't like being in the government as a bureaucrat. I didn't want to be a professor studying the same thing forever. I didn't want to be in the corporate sector. It seemed too like dark to me. And so, but I was a practical person. I understood business, and I also didn't feel like, well, I'm not really an artist, but I'm creative. So somehow all these things came together, and I don't want to be a teacher in a high school to
Mhm.
kind of like do my own thing that I wake up every day happy and excited to do. And even though it doesn't always work out and sometimes there's a lot of pressure, I'd rather feel that about my own thing than, doing something for someone else that I don't really love.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I think that's really something funny of people with like, you know, the entrepreneurial spirit kind of thing. Um, is it does feel like kind of you're like, I just feel really something really deeply. Like I just feel like I can actually do this differently and then like my own way. Um, but again, like you're just told in every way that that's not what to do. And
Oh,
I think
so yeah,
you're like against the grain from the start. Um,
yeah,
especially if you want to start like doing stuff your own way. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know if this has happened to you, but so many times still to this day. I mean, I just turned 40. I said to my mom, wow, it's kind of a bit of a, I noticed, for example, from COVID is affecting people and then it's affecting small businesses, right? And it's
Mhm.
kind of scary. And so my mom says, well, maybe you should get a job. And I'm like, I have a job.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I like to I reference I was like I feel like I have three jobs plus all of the
Yeah,
management that happens behind those things. Um which is bonkers and yeah, no I still get my dad still wants me to be a lawyer. He thinks I'd be a great lawyer. And I'm you know what? I bet I would be a great lawyer. I have no interest in it. You know, and I think it's like if we're gonna place, you know, love my dad, he means well when he says those things. And I
yeah,
think a lot of the time when you're getting parents making those comments about, you know, career decisions, et cetera, I think it really comes from a loving place. And maybe even
yeah,
like, you know, I don't have children. However, I can assume that you're saying things to protect them. You know, you want them to be safe, you
right.
want them to be
Well,
happy,
there's
you want them to be well
bravery,
taken care of. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But I think if you're going to place a lot of value on those things, like, man, you're never gonna it's never going to be the thing, and you're never like you're never, they're never going to be happy and you're never going to be happy, you know, like it's just this tension that's here. So um I just think, like I said, again, it's not easy. These things aren't easy, but it's like, I think the sooner we start like attacking that weed, like that root system, like, man, that's just going to bring you more peace further down the line. Um,
Yeah.
than like,
So
I don't know,
tell,
trapping yourself somewhere.
it sounds like you're talking about in a way, this is a good segue to mental wellness. And, what's the connection between self-care, mental wellness, and creativity? I know this is a lot of kind of like what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So um, I grew up, I think, always just a very anxious, depressed child. It's one of those things looking back now, you're like, oh, you're not supposed to be in the fifth grade crying like just all day, or like feeling deep dread. And again, going back to getting a dyslexia diagnosis, I just found out like a couple of weeks ago that dyslexia also is a neurodiversity, like obviously. Like, so the treatment is typically similar to people with like ADHD or autism, and that it's like, okay, your brain just literally needs something different. So yeah, like it's something I've always struggled with in my life. I finished my undergrad, and I was like, so on art school undergrad, so you do a thesis, and I fully burnt myself out doing my thesis in my last year. And I think this is pretty common for a lot of students doing any kind of thesis or any kind of final work. I was not well. I finished school. I was happy to finish, loved it. Was just working way too hard. Finished school, and I don't think I made anything for like a couple of years, to be super honest. Maybe I don't know. I think a year had gone by, and both my grandparents had passed away in a very small amount of time. And I was extremely close with my grandparents. I had moved back home to be closer to them as well while I was finishing my undergrad. And I had like a lot of life stuff come up.
Right.
And not doing well. I just was not doing well. I couldn't get out of bed. My lovely sweet partner, thank you to them, was bringing me food every day just to make sure I like stayed eating. And I was on my way to work one day, and I was like, I was getting my coffee before I got on the bus, like I did every morning. And I looked up and I saw, like, I think it was disco Pilates poster. And I was like, I'm going to go to that. Like, I don't know. I'd never been to a Pilates class before. The word disco 100% got me. Like, that's very much my jam. And I just fell in love within a couple of months of taking my first Pilates class. I started a teacher training. And I think for me, even, seeing therapists for most of my life, is really starting to like bolster my toolkit of like other things that help me feel good in the world, allowed me to like come back and actually make some artwork and like feel and express things, and just like get out of bed on days that like I didn't have to be at work, and like go outside.
Right.
Like, free. And so for me, it was I think this is common for like a lot of movement instructors, a similar, what's the word, like origin story kind of thing.
Okay.
Or for a lot of people, knowing that movement just is something that feels good inside of them.
Right.
But again, like, we're told that like, running's good for you or whatever. But if you don't like running, or I've never run a day in my life. I have no interest in these things. But like, science tells us over and over again, moving your body is good for your mental health, like release endorphins. Like, great. Okay. Intelligently, I understand these things, but like integrating them into my bones and like understanding them emotionally is a completely different thing. So yeah, it was like, for me, that was the first moment of like really understanding like, oh, therapy's great. Still see my therapist every other week. Much love to you, Carly. But like adding these other things in my toolkit. So some of the other things that I do is like I'm a big morning pages person. I don't know if you've ever read Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. I
Oh,
recommend it to everybody.
yeah.
Everybody, like, go read The Artist's Way.
Okay.
Julia Cameron's also a big believer in everyone's an artist. So yeah, I would say like journaling,
Mm.
moving my body, and like throughout the pandemic, I'm a Pilates instructor. I would say my number one like movement practice is dancing in my kitchen every day. So I don't care. I don't
Oh, I
care
do
what
that
those
too.
are. Yeah, great. We have movement practices, you know, and like redefining what these things are for ourselves. You're like, oh, this actually like makes me feel really good.
Yeah.
And helps my brain
Makes me look
exist another
forward to
day.
doing the dishes.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Maybe makes it a little bit less painful too. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's just like bolstering our, like the resources and the tools that we have to um I use the word trick my brain, but
Mm.
also, you know, like feed my brain good stuff, because sometimes it's just bad chemicals out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is kind of related to the intro about how people sometimes get focused so much on like meeting milestones, they forget to like just do fun little things, like dance
Yeah,
in
and
the
like
kitchen.
yeah, I have sticky notes all over my office, that I'm like, they're like, it's kind of goofy. I forgot because I hadn't had people in my house for like a year and a half. I like leave sticky notes everywhere, and I had my friends over for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, oh, I look like a serial killer or something like that with just little notes around my house. But another note I have is everything is awful, everything is a miracle. And I think, you know, being alive is really hard. Um, there's everything in the world just to tell you to not succeed or achieve or feel good or stop. But like the leaves are changing outside right
Right.
now. And like, I love trees are always like my go-to. They make me feel like a person. Like the weather's gloomy, like moss exists. Moss is such a cool thing. Like I best friends are a thing in the world, you know, like there are these moments that feel good. And I think just taking a moment of mindfulness and like really enjoying those things is like, so when you get the next milestone, like when you get to the
Yeah.
thing, you're like well equipped to actually enjoy it and like, oh,
Right.
look at me, I did it. Instead of just like, okay,
Yeah.
on to the next
And
thing.
then go on to the next one. Yeah. Because the high doesn't last very long.
No, no, it doesn't.
Lows do.
Yes, yes, yes.
So, okay. So this maybe explains a little bit, but you could delve into a little more. Like, where does this name "Okay Shoe" come from?
Yes, I love this question. Yes, great segue. I had the word shoe. I always knew when I was in school I wanted to do something. Like
Right.
my first idea was like, I think I want to have a gallery, a shop of some sort. I always knew I really like working collaboratively with other artists. My background specifically is in printmaking, which is a traditional, like I would have been a tradesperson even like 30, 40 years ago.
Right.
It's how newspapers are printed, like as some of the
Okay.
okay shoot, that's what I was telling
Yeah.
you. And so it's a very collaborative kind of art form. Like you're in a studio with a lot of other people a lot of the time. It's not something like a lot of printmakers don't have their own spaces that you work in. You know, you typically go to another space to work with people. Um, and so that's something I knew I always wanted because it was what I loved the most about being in school. Um, and I had grown up where I'm from Hamilton. I grew up downtown Hamilton, and there is this old it's not actually abandoned, it just kind of looks like it, building that just says shoe on the front of it. It's an old shoe store. It's I think essentially operates as a warehouse right now. And in like bright bold red letters it says shoe. If you go back to like okay shoes first Instagram, I post it every once in a while because I love it so much. I still walk by it, it's still there, it still works, it's still in operation. And I loved it. I thought it was the funniest thing on planet Earth, just like big building with the word shoe on it. And because I'm a heady, weird, conceptual artist, thinker, I was like, wow, shoes are so what an interesting concept shoes are. They can cost $3. They can cost $3,000. Everybody wears them in some sort of fashion. They can be a form of self-expression. They can be nothing. Sometimes they're uniform. I just thought shoes were like a really like, they represent to me like a great unifier of some sorts. Like, wow, we all wear shoes. What a funny idea. And unfortunately, shoe.com was not an available URL when I was like looking to start my business. And like, it also didn't really make sense. I was like, I knew it needed something else. We don't sell shoes. We don't make shoes at all. So I was like, I can't just call my business Shoe. And then I had done some reading again, because I'm a weird nerd. I'd done some reading about the word okay, the history of the word okay, and specifically like the symbol. And how I like all of these things have 100% fallen out of my brain. But I think it's a very interesting word. I think it like represents neutrality in a really interesting way. It can be positive. It can also be a negative. You can,
okay.
Yeah, exactly. Like fine, okay. Or like, oh yeah, I'm great. Okay. You can spell it multiple ways. It can be spelled with 4 letters. It can be spelled with 1. And so same thing. I really liked the like multiple definitions that the word okay could mean. And I plopped okay and shoe next to each other on like my brainstorming page. And I was like, they're 4 letters. They look interesting together. I think it sounds weird. When I was first starting Okay Shoe, I was in a grant, like small business accelerator, and the marketing dude that I was working with told me it was a bad idea. He said, like, this is not a good name. And I went, well, I think that probably means I love that name now because you're not my target demographic. So that's where the name comes from. And for me, I really wanted an umbrella to be able to work with all of the different artists that we work with, and for it to kind of take on a different name or different form, different shape, physically or I don't know, loftily, metaphysically, in the way that our artists that we work with use it. So yeah, that's Okay Shoe.
Cool origin story.
Thanks.
You talked kind of more broadly about yourself and being kind of an anxious child and self-care, but how does the creativity piece fit in there? You talked about some of the things you did, like, movements and journaling. How do you think creativity is really important to the self-care piece?
I think, I mean, like I was saying earlier, like using our brains in new different ways is how we can be okay. And I think a lot of the same thing with like the naming of Okay Shoe, being positive is a very hard thing for me a lot of the time. I think
it's weird because you seem very positive.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think a lot of the time people think the opposite because, I dress in bright colors and smile a lot. But I find being positive, like, there's like signs up on my street right now that are like, love yourself. And I was like, yeah. Like, okay, how, I think a lot of, the cursive pink, like feel good, like Instagram posts are missing the like systemic ways in which we don't feel good, or like, like I said, like everything is awful. Like being alive is hard. Like washing your face is it's just difficult. Every night of my life, I lie down in bed. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't wash my face. I have to get up again. Taking care of yourself is hard. It's hard. So I think like creativity saves my life every day because I have to remind myself like, okay, I don't feel good. Maybe all of the things that I do, that I know are gonna like probably, you know, I'm probably gonna feel good if I like go move my body for a little bit. I know I'm probably gonna feel good if I don't know, don't eat an entire bag of chips. Or actually, no, I usually feel good when I eat an entire bag of chips too.
Afterwards, I don't
Um,
feel very good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. Like it's just like the balancing of all of these things. But I have to use creativity to get myself off of the couch. You know, I have to, and certainly, you know, my art practice is definitely an expression of those things. But I think creativity is a lot smaller than just the creation of something a lot of the time. But I work one-on-one with a lot of businesses, and somebody had said to me the other day, they're like, I just want to live a more creative life. And I was like, you know, we went through and we listed like all of the writing that they could do for their business and that kind of stuff. And then at the end, I was just like, or you could just like light a candle and like open a window and create an inspiring environment for yourself to do your bookkeeping in, or like whatever maybe not great task that you need to do. And so I think creativity is just like this way in which I can sustain myself. And not always be like this big. It certainly is a big thing, you know, like I need to create. Sitting next to me on my desk right now is a big mess of sewing, like a big sewing pile mess. And that's something that I do just for myself. That feels really nice, but I think I could not sew and still feel, you know, I could like not make something and still feel like creativity was really important to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about this workshop you have, Finding Play and Creativity.
Yeah. So finding play and creativity is it's more of an approach that I use in the individual workshops that we host through OK Shoe.
Okay.
Specifically, we just every month we host something called OK Hang. And finding OK Hang is we meet online. I usually start with an opening questions instead of, I really love when, people are logging on into the Zoom room, and instead of asking people, hi, how are you? Which, in the world that
Yeah.
we live in, the answer is good or okay.
Yeah. I actually just answer whatever and people go,
Yeah, I love that. I love that. But instead, a lot of the time I'll ask questions, something like, what is your relationship to creativity? Or like, in what ways are you tending to yourself right now? And I really love starting those circles with a question that can kind of just bring us like, oh, let's get in the muck together. And I think, I always offer, people can share as much as they want or not at all,
yeah.
I think the funny thing, it's like, as much you're an adult in your house, like you can turn your computer off if you don't want to talk to me anymore. But so when I say, I get so lost in the weeds. I get too excited when I start talking.
So is that OK Hang part of the Finding Play and Creativity, or?
Yes. Yeah. I think finding play in creativity is the method. It is the approach in which like I try and make that creativity an easier thing for people to digest. So OK Hang specifically is, I'll ask questions and then I pull prompts from our OK Oracle.
Mm-hmm.
And people are, I give the space to create whatever, non-urgent space for creation. Sometimes that's people working on longer term projects. Sometimes it's people like actually drawing to a prompt or something. So yeah, finding the playfulness that can exist in these spaces of creativity that we say that we don't have, or you can't do,
Right.
or it's weird, or it's silly, or it's goofy, or like, I don't know, you're too
Do you
old or whatever.
draw to be in this OK Shoe Hang,
No.
or
Oh my God, no.
like whatever?
It's whatever. We have people that show up. Some people come and knit. Some people come and I think right now I may be the only person drawing. We have some people that come in collage. Oh, that's not true. We have a painter, literally have a shoemaker that comes sometimes, which I'm like, I love that. That's perfect. Yeah, I would say the majority of the people that I work with are not art, not professional artists or paid artists in any kind of aspect. They're people that know that they're like, oh, I know I like to make something, or I've got a little bit of creativity in my life, and there's no rules and okay hang. Aside from what the first one is like, don't be an asshole, and the second is everyone's an artist. And if you come to okay hang and you say you're not an artist, like, I'm going to gently bully you and just telling you you're wrong.
So if I was like a student really stressed out about assignments and stuff, and I'm like, how could joining this workshop or any of the other workshops help me?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely have some, I think we definitely have some like students or, mid-university people coming in being like, I am feeling burnt out. And I think that's what I was saying. Sometimes I have people actually had somebody, I think it would have been like the springtime that they were sending their master schools applications. They were coming to OK Hang to like work on their master's applications. Like, and that was the kind of point they were just like, I don't really know what I'm doing right now with this. I don't really know what I'm writing. I just kind of need an external infusion of inspiration of some kind. And so sometimes for that person, like that individual, they were writing, and other times they're like, oh, I was planning on writing, but I think I'm actually just going to like doodle on the back of this card for half an hour. Doodling is so amazing for our brains. Again, I'm not a scientist. There's a lot of interesting science around it. And that like giving our brain space to just kind of wander around is like, it's where ideas come from. And I think when I'm, one of my favorite directors, David Lynch, calls, shocking. He calls ideas, he calls like sitting or like thinking, going fishing. He calls ideas fish. And he's like, you have to go and sit on the dock really quietly and like go fishing. And I think that's like what doodling or okay hang, or, for me, it's my morning pages. Like that's what my fishing is. That's where like my inspiration comes from. And like, then you can evaluate and be like, oh, what keeps coming up? Like, what's the idea here? What's like the actual thing I'm thinking about? I might be drawing a shark every day, but like what I'm actually really interested in is like, what's the thread here? I don't know, like biodiversity in oceans. Like, maybe. I don't know. Or yeah, like I keep drawing a shark. Oh, am I actually really interested in like oceanic life? Maybe I need to go write a dissertation on this, or, like, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like what's Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote, Eat, Pray, Love.
Yeah.
Talks about her morning pages a lot. And she was like, it took me a year, and I went back through my like journal over the year, and like I kept coming up that I wanted to learn Italian. Like I didn't know that about myself. Okay. And so she was like, well, I guess I better go to Italy.
Oh, and that's part of the reason she goes, I guess.
Yeah.
Like and that was inspiration for the book.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, so it's just like, you never know where these seeds are going to come from. And I think if you give give your brain space, to like wander around, like you're going to find something. Our brains are like so amazing.
Yeah.
They make our lives really difficult some days. So like, obviously they're going to make your life really great others,
Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm. Oh, cool. So to me, this is sounding like something you could use if you're experiencing writer's block, which I think is really common for students, and especially graduate students. If they're having to work, like you mentioned, that graduate student, if they're having to work on like a major several hundred page thing that's overwhelming and daunting, and just being able to go into space and have some fun and practice that, just generating ideas, thoughts, doodles, poems, whatever, spontaneously.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of the times, from my experience with like, writing business plans, writing grant applications, being in academic settings, when you're like, page 40 of like 140, you're just so deep in the weeds of what's going on. I think it's hard to kind of get, you're like, what am I actually trying to do here? And kind of walking away and coming back with like, like I said, like this person was just like, what am I actually trying to write about? Or like reminding yourself what the like nugget of the thing is. Like, oh, okay, right now I can write towards this thing. Now I can move towards this in some sort of capacity. Yeah.
Yeah, having that mental break, using the other side of your brain for a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had another kind of recent graduate come on, and he had started a business for reducing food waste. And so one thing I really care about myself is, as a business owner, is doing business a different way, doing it in a way that's socially conscious, having integrity. Obviously, making money is an important part of business, but that not being like the whole focus of having a business, which is kind of what they teach you in business school. But I noticed, like, being socially conscious or socially responsible is really important to you. In particular, like, I saw that post about Made in China, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. Like, how do you maintain that social responsibility, and you learn?
Yeah, for me, it comes down to like, and when I'm making a decision about something, it comes down to like a gut feeling. Like, can can I sleep at night knowing, I don't know, I screwed over like the artists that I'm working with in whatever, financially, am I ripping them off? I just in okay shoes practices. We're really transparent about the way we work with artists. Like on our about page, it tells you how much we pay our artists at the end of every year. I do a roundup of like how much we paid artists total and how much we redistributed to other funds. And like living in when I say creativity is for all people, I really absolutely understand this like the deep, oppressive systems that are in place to tell people that creativity is not for all. So how could I possibly say creativity is for all and run this business when I'm not contributing to the other ways in which that's just not a choice? When you're like, stuff in your life's really hard, and whether you're a houseless person or you're just unable to access studio time, like it doesn't matter what kind of situation you're in, you're not gonna excuse me, you're not going to feel like creativity is something that could be a part of your life, yeah, absolutely.
Going toward finding solutions to ways to eat, or
yeah, absolutely,
stay warm.
Absolutely. Or, when I'm talking about when I'm looking at the artists that are in the room that I'm working with, I'm like, okay, I'm a white woman. Like who else needs to be at this table here? And who's missing from the room, and who do I need to pass this mic to? And who do I need to be listening to? And yeah, so that's part of my decision making in business. And it's just something that's like, it just is important to me. As a kid, my mom has worked for not-for-profits most of her life. I started my high school's social justice club. It's who I am. And I think art and movement and my mission on earth, that's what I like to call it, really is that. And I use art, creativity, movement as vehicles for the change that I want to see in the world. Made in China is something that's really important to me. You can go and check it out on I won't totally, I won't go off on a total tangent right now.
Tell us a little bit the idea, because Made in China is usually like, oh, Made in China, like this is crap.
Yeah, absolutely. Made in China has been synonymous with poor quality, especially I think in the last 20 years, of poor labor practices as well. And so there's something when there's a law in any manufacturing in any I think I'll speak to North America specifically because that's what I know. But I do believe it's anything that's manufactured in China needs to say where things are manufactured from. So whether or not your manufacturers in Sweden, like India, wherever, it doesn't matter.
Right.
In North America, you need to state where that thing is being manufactured from. So when I was looking for a printer for the OK Oracle, I found a lovely printer that was based in China. I was really excited about their work. I had another friend who had created a deck through them. I loved, like, I'll shout out to Jess. She wrote the Birds Oracle. Highly recommend it. It's absolutely gorgeous. I just thought they did a really great job. They did a really great job. The price was right. I got in touch. I researched the manufacturer as well. Lovely, lovely people. 10 out of 10 experience. And they've been very supportive of the work that we've been doing with Proudly Printed in China as well. And so when it came down to like writing, like, you have to disclose this information on your packaging, I wrote Proudly Printed in China. That was inspired by another creator called, I can't remember her name, but she runs Chunks. They're like a hair accessories company.
Okay. Yeah.
And similar, they write proudly manufactured in China. And I think
the link. I think you have the link on your
yes, post. yes, absolutely. And so it's just been this history of, I mean, like, I could go into it. There's sweatshops in North America, Toronto, Montreal specifically, really, really awful for poor labor practices. And so I think we put LA, same thing. I think we put, like, I see this time of year made in Canada gift guides and stuff like that that's coming out, which is lovely. If it's actually made in Canada, a lot of the times we're getting these pieces, if you're a jeweler, your pieces that you're assembling, it's assembled in Canada, but like the pieces are made in China as well. So it's just like this like bizarre gray area that we deem as amoral or not. And it's important to me, if I'm going to say, like I said, like creativity right on our packaging, it says, like, this is a tool for everybody. I need to be like really discerning about who everybody is. And I need to actively call those people into the room. And if I'm writing made in China, like I am absolutely so proud to have my work manufactured in China. I absolutely trust our manufacturers and the working livable conditions that they provide for their employees. And who's to say that like, what's the quality control on, anybody else at the One of a Kind show in Toronto or these made in Canada gift guides? Cause you can't like made in North America isn't better. Yeah.
Really
yeah.
I think that's a really important point. And I think in the post, you bring up the idea of racism.
Yeah. It's a racist assumption. 100%.
Yeah, because before it was made in Taiwan, it was made in Thailand. It was whatever developing country is currently the manufacturer of the world. The assumption is that it's crap.
Yeah, and like
it's not, people are being taken in. And there is a lot. I mean, that's not coming from nowhere.
No, but it's not coming from nowhere, but I just think it's bizarre that we have this standard for overseas and not for countries outside of North America, but like we don't hold those same, things up against ourselves.
Point. And that it's important to actually research the specific manufacturer and not make assumptions that all manufacturers from wherever are the same. And good point about the jewelry. I mean, same thing about cars. People buy a GM or a Ford or something, but it's actually made all over the world, and they just send all the pieces, and maybe they put it together in oak film.
Yep.
It's a very complex supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I won't pretend. I won't say like Proudly Printed in China is. It's like a piece of an extremely large puzzle that, I'm a tiny, tiny little part of. But like I said, it's really important to me to operate my business as like, our businesses or any dreams we have it can be a new way of working in the world, and the way in which we can contribute. Sure, it might not be status quo, but like, do you want status quo for your life? Like, how you doing? Is any of this working for you? Like, I don't want like today to be tomorrow. I want to do better again tomorrow. So like, why not create and dream? And like, that's what like I said, our big, beautiful brains are capable of these dreaming better futures. So like, why not actually do it? In small ways, one of our contributions is like a very small little detail on a box.
Yeah. So if you had kind of like one tip, one thing you wanted a young adult, like a high school student, a 20, just starting university, 20-year-old to take away about how they can sustain creativity throughout their life, despite all the pressures to fit in a box, to do something a certain way, to meet a certain set of social expectations, what would you tell them? How can they kind of hang on to that inner child?
I love that. I would say take a breath. I would say pause. And I know it's hard. Like, I'm a meditation teacher as well. I don't take a breath. Like, I know it's hard to stop. But I think our effort is in trying and paying attention. Pay attention to what you pay attention to, and pause and like check in with your feeling. You're like, do I need a glass of water? Do I need to have a nap? Do I need to go and doodle? We stay connected to our creativity by staying connected to ourselves.
That's deep. Yeah, and I think maybe that's why little kids are so much more creative and tuned with the spontaneity, because and on the one hand, they're not really aware why they're screaming at 2 p.m. that they need a nap. But on the other hand,
they know something's not right
by their emotions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And once they can communicate, they know, like, I need a snack. Give me a snack. I need a snack.
Yeah.
They're not going to relent until they get a snack.
No, and I don't care if dinner is in an hour. Like, I'm hungry now. And I think, by like checking in with ourselves, and it's like, and if you pause long enough, like, our bodies are pretty loud. And if you don't stop now, you'll stop later in a way that it screams at you, and you'll,
that's
end up in a hospital with exhaustion. Yeah.
Very true.
Or migraines, that's something I mentioned. It's like, oh, wow. I have a friend sometimes it's like, oh, I just had a 3-day migraine. I'm like, when was the last time you took a day off of work? Oh, they correlate, like, shocking. Yeah.
Good advice.
Yeah. And we can't afford to like not listen to ourselves either. We need everybody in the revolution. We need everybody to contribute to a better world. So take a day off if you need to, or take a breath. I think we all can spare a second.
Yeah. Resting is part of productivity.
Yeah.
I think we need to reframe this, working 24/7 hero, like,
hustle,
like CSI or something. How are these people like awake that long? Somehow they're solving complex crimes.
3 a.m.
And they all look really good. I mean, no way. If you didn't sleep, your skin. But
like,
of workaholism.
I mean, even in those shows, their personal lives are falling apart. So it's like,
they
to what point?
That part right, but the rest, there's a lot of stuff missing about how much they would really be suffering. So I like books, and we can kind of see behind me. You mentioned a few books, a few authors throughout the interview. Is there any other book you'd want to add or recommend to someone?
Yes. I'd love. My favorite book right now is, it's one of my favorites, Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Absolutely beautiful. She's an Indigenous scientist. and really sweetly weaves together Indigenous knowledge and scientific, or I think she says Indigenous teachings and scientific knowledge. Incredible book. It's one of my favorites. I pick it up constantly. I'm trying to think, but it's on my nightstand right now. I just finished reading Sally Rooney's new book, Beautiful World, Where Are You? I think that's what it's called as well. And I'm a big Marley Grace fan. Marley Grace's book, Return to Center or Getting to Center, I really love as well. Yeah.
All right, awesome. Thanks for all those suggestions. And Phoebe is doing a lot of amazing things. If you're in Hamilton, check her out. If not, she's online. If not, order her Oracle cards. Check her out on social media. The best way to find her is to go to her website, which is just her name, phoebetaylor.ca. And thanks so much for being on the podcast today, Phoebe.
Thanks, Lisa.
It was great.
Yeah, likewise. Great. Thank you so much.